welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for being with us. So take it away.
It's my pleasure. I hope all you saints are celebrating out there since it's All Saints Day. Maybe we should start by singing When the Saints Come Marching In, but I think we'll save that to another time. But it's I want to thank you, Boyd, and especially David, for inviting me to be with you. It's an honor to participate, and I like to think of you all as Ascended Master friends. That we're being, as the Ascended Masters move higher in their stations and in their evolution, we're being trained to take their places. So I think when we are classified, or they think of us as their friends, and so as we all join together in the center of the heart, then we're all part of that great white brotherhood. So I'm not going to repeat some of the things that are in my books. So as David pointed out, this is all available, so I'll try not to be repetitious. I've just come back from a almost 3-year retreat in a cabin in the mountains of upstate New York, in the western slope of the Catskill Mountains. And the reason I went there, well, sort of miraculously, this cabin was offered to me, and I felt the strong pull to go there, and I felt that I was to complete the ascension there. And so for about the last 2.5 years, I was working on raising my energy. And so I was meditating one night about 2 in the morning, and frequently I'll meditate with my eyes open, doing Vipassana. And these two masters appeared to me, Kuthumi and Morya. And, you know, I suppose after you read my books, you'll think I'm hanging out with the masters all the time. This is not true. I lead a normal life like everyone else. I have to chop wood and carry water, split wood, shovel snow, things like that. So, you know, balance my checkbook. The masters are not sitting there with me. Well, they are actually sitting with all of us, but they don't let us know that most of the time. So these two masters appeared. I just saw them from the shoulders up, probably like where you're seeing me. And it was really a surprise visit that brought joy to my heart. And they said, "Do you want to leave your body?" And which is why I thought I was there in the first place. But I thought carefully. When the masters ask you a question, it really pays to think clearly about what you really want, you know. So, but I didn't really need to think. The answer came out spontaneously. I want what will benefit the most people. Of course, in my mind, I thought if I was ascended, I could benefit more people that way. But I didn't want to make a snap judgment, so I left it up to them. And they have a great sense of humor. And they said, "Well, give your answer to the boss." So I knew what they meant by that was the Lord Maha Chohan. But they didn't tell me what the answer was. But a few months later, I got the guidance to come and visit Mount Shasta. And as I was walking around town, I walked past Pearl's house. Pearl was my former teacher who'd been assistant to Godfrey Ray King, and she passed on in 1990. And as I was walking past her house, I heard Saint Germain clearly say, "I want you to continue Pearl's work." Now, of course, nobody could really do that but Pearl, but I knew he meant to continue it in my own way. which was to be available in the physical body, to meet with people that come here, and I suppose to have conversations like this. So here I am, and I'm grateful for David for connecting us. And I would like to go back and say, a lot of people would like the masters to sit down and tell them the future. I think maybe David was hoping I have an inside track on that, and I'm going to give the answer to that. But so all I can do is share what I've been given. And I'd like to go back. My first experience that I'm aware of with Saint Germain was when I was camped on the slopes of Mount Shasta in, I believe, 1972. I had just come back from 6 months in India with Ram Dass and Neem Karoli Baba and meeting many other saints there. And I had been a guest of the Theosophical Society in India. And I had read their Unveiled Mysteries, or I had tried to read it, but I was really turned off by the introduction where it said, in the Ascended Master Octave, these books are bound in covers encrusted with jewels, because the whole Indian philosophy was based on renunciation, on giving up attachment to material things. So when they started talking about jewels and abundance, I thought that those were very limited teachings. So, but I did see Saint Germain's picture, and I accepted that he was a real being, but that he probably didn't know about me. And it wasn't until, well, 3 people in India came up to me and said, you should go to Mount Shasta. So the third person convinced me, and I said, okay, when I get back to Mount Shasta, that's where I'll go. So my plane landed in San Francisco. And I came to Mount Shasta, and I was fasting on the mountain. And I woke up one morning, and there was someone there talking to me that I couldn't see. And I'd never had this experience before of having contact with somebody in the etheric, or maybe I had had in childhood, but I hadn't had this experience for a long time. And this being seemed to know all about me. And then he started to tell me the future, at least over the coming year. And he said that I would go back to India, which I didn't want to do because I'd almost died the first time there. And so I was not excited about going back. And I said, I don't want to go back to India. And he said, well, you are. And then he said I was going to sell my farm that I had in upstate New York. And this was a beautiful, beautiful farm on a hilltop about a half hour from Woodstock. And I was very attached to that place. I didn't want to sell it. And then he said, you're going to move to Mount Shasta. And at that time, Mount Shasta was a real redneck logging town. I mean, when you walk down the street, if you were a stranger, people would stare at you. And at that point, I had long hair down my back, and I was wearing white pajamas like they wear in India, or they used to wear in India, and sandals, and people would really give me the cold stare. So it was not, the idea of moving there was not exciting. And the last thing he said was, you're going to change your name to the name of the mountain. And I said, Mount Shasta? And he said, yes. And I said, you got to be kidding. Because I had a lot of friends that changed their names to Indian names, and I thought it was ridiculous. But so I argued with him for a while, and I said, I'm not going to do that. And he said, well, we shall see. And then he left. And then at that point, I was working on a little booklet. It was more of a poem. And I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to use that as a pen name. And sure enough, I left Mount Shasta. I went to the first rainbow gathering in Colorado. And then Sai Baba appeared to me and asked me to come back to India. And so everything that Saint Germain said actually came to pass. And when I got back to, well, Saint Germain appeared to me in Muir Woods. This was in the spring of '73. And I'm not going to repeat this story because it's in my book, Apprentice to the Masters. And the question I get from a lot of people that come here or call me is, was that a real physical experience, or was it an inner experience, or were you on drugs, or, you know, what state did this happen in? And this was a real, I was not taking drugs. This was a real physical plane experience where I was sitting in the woods with my eyes open, and he appeared to me like a hiker, just wearing jeans and tennis shoes, except that he knew my name, and the rest of it you can read in the book. But he's the one that told me to come back to Mount Shasta, that I would meet my teacher here, who turned out to be Pearl. So that was in 1973 that I came back to Mount Shasta. So since then, very rarely have I found that the masters tell me the future, because they say that would weaken us. That in order to become the master, we have to learn to get the guidance within. And I remember at my first meeting with Pearl, she said, Saint Germain is helping you and giving you guidance. And I said, well, I don't hear a thing. And she said, well, your mind would interfere if you could hear it. He's transmitting it directly to your higher mental body. So at the right time, you will perceive the guidance as intuition, or you will perceive it as a feeling in your heart. And then you will just automatically do the right thing. If he told you verbally what you were meant to do, your mind would start working and you'd have lots of questions, or you would say, that's impossible, I can't do that. It sounds too complicated. So the way we become masters is really by learning to feel that presence in the heart and following that, regardless of all the mental ideas to the contrary. However, I have had certain experiences with Saint Germain where he's given inclinations or guidance about the future. And I will share one of those with you now, because it's very appropriate to the times we're in. And I do mention this in my book, but it's only a very short section where I was guided to go to Lake Louise in Canada, which is a focal point of Archangel Michael. And it was quite an experience. I'd been driving all day, and they had left the lights on, even though I didn't get there till late at night. And as soon as I checked in, they turned the lights off. They gave me a room. And I was so tired, I just lay down on my bed and just in my clothes and fell asleep. And the next thing I know, there was a man standing there in the room. And I habitually lock hotel room doors when I enter. So I knew I'd locked the door. But here was this man standing by my bed, and he was wearing a jumpsuit, like with elastic wristbands. And he had short hair, and he seemed very familiar, but I didn't know his name. And he said, come with me. And I said, excuse me, first of all, how did you get into my room? And second of all, why should I go with you? You know, not only don't I know who you are, but someone breaks into my room in the middle of the night, I'm not inclined to go anywhere with them. And he said, there's a friend waiting for you. And I thought, a friend in the middle of the mountains in Canada at like 10 o'clock at night? Who could that be? I don't know any friends that are up here. So he said, well, I don't have time to wait. You have to give me your answer now. And I looked at him and I saw this bluish white light around him. His whole body was luminescent and was emitting this soft blue light. And I thought, well, that's a good sign. I'll go. I said, I'll go with you. So we walked out the door and we walked outside through the snow. Now, keep in mind, this is not in my dense flesh body. That body was asleep, but it seemed to me that it was. So my perception was that I'm in my waking body and we're walking through the snow. We were not levitating or anything like that. So my perception, it was what you'd call a vivid dreaming, but it was not a dream. Anyway, I was in my body that's slightly more subtle than the flesh body. And we walked through the snow and we walked out onto the surface of the frozen lake. Lake Louise was frozen and had about a foot of snow on it. And there was this beautiful silver disc hovering over the snow. And again, I stopped in my tracks and I thought, where is this guy taking me? This looks a little bit scary. And again, I saw the light around him and I thought, well, I'll follow him, but I can turn back at any time. So we got close to this craft and a ramp came down from the side of the craft. And at this point, my heart was definitely pulling me to go forward. And we got onto the craft, and there was the beloved Master Saint Germain in a violet cape, somewhat similar to the picture behind me. And he smiled and he said, I'm glad that you came, you followed your guidance. And as soon as I got on board, well, the commander of this, it was a little craft, maybe 25, 30 feet in diameter. And the commander was a woman who I had also met before in Mount Shasta in a similar out-of-the-body experience. And then there was this man who had come to get me, and then Saint Germain and myself. And we immediately took off straight up and went over the North Pole. And the next thing I know, we went down through the North Pole into the center of the earth. And at that point, I was not allowed to remember anymore. Subsequently, I had other experiences in the inner earth. And Pearl used to talk about the inner earth. She said, many of the great souls who, when they left their bodies, they went there, and there's a great civilization there. Now, I don't know that this is actually completely physical plane. There are many other dimensions that interpenetrate the earth, or I should say frequencies. Just like right now on my computer, I could be watching 6 different pages, websites. These are in the atmosphere around me, but I only see the one that I have on my screen right now, but they're still there. So these many other frequencies of the earth are also existing simultaneously with this one. And as we raise our consciousness, we start to move into those frequencies consciously. So I think that's the great work that we're involved in right now, is raising our vibratory rate so that we can be conscious in those other frequencies. And Saint Germain told me at the end of this, when he brought me back in this craft, at some time in the future, something will happen on the face of the earth that will be necessary to transport certain portion of humanity to another place. So I'm not going to say any more about that, but again, it ties in with these frequencies that we are being prepared right now as we meditate and we do our affirmations to go consciously into those other frequencies. And that's really where the meditation comes in. And many people tell me that things are happening to them in this past year that they've never experienced before. One of those is to feel suddenly tired, like they want to lie down for no apparent reason. Or they'll wake up in the morning feeling tired. And some people have told me, in fact, a good friend of mine told me that he had the experience that he was on a great mothership, and there was nothing extraordinary about it. He was aware that he'd actually been there for quite some time, a number of months, and that he was interfacing with other people. And part of the reason of being there was to become acclimated to that higher vibratory rate, and that they were doing work on in that other frequency to benefit Earth, and that he saw many of the people that he knows on the Earth in waking consciousness were also on this craft. And I would say, again, this is a clue to some of the transitional work that we're engaged in at the present time. And that it's very important not to get caught up in the outer worldly conspiracies that are taking place. There are efforts being made by the dark forces to ensnare people into the old world, into the lower vibratory rate of these political events that are happening, political and economic events, and to cause doubt and fear and suspicion and anger and so on. And if we give in to those and we get drawn into that, then we're blocking our advancement. Our work right now is to perfect ourselves and to ask, how can I become a better person? It's great to send thoughts of peace to the world and to do affirmations for peace. But the peace begins within us. So we have to say, I am peace, and to feel peace, and to look within and say, well, I don't like people judging me, but am I judging others? Dear God, show me what I need to work on so that I can move into this ascended master dimension, that I can move into the company of enlightened beings, or I can move to Shambhala and be among others without inflicting my own imperfections on them. So we're in this great preparatory phase now where we're sort of between octaves. And it's important not to get pulled back into the old way of thinking, but to move forward courageously with our inner work and our affirmations. And those affirmations begin within one's own heart. Whatever you decree, whatever you affirm, starts first within you. So that's why it's so important when you do these affirmations to have the inner feeling of it first. Like, feel the peace within your own heart and feel the love within your own heart. And then you can say, I am love and I am peace. And it's not just in the mind. Like if you're saying, I am peace, 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 what am I generating? Well, that's more like anger, or, that's will. I just recently had an email from a girl, and she signed her name Peace Warrior. And I said, isn't that a contradiction? Peace and warrior? And she said, oh, I never thought about that. You're right. I'll have to work on that. Because if you are that peace, you don't need to be the warrior. Where the warriorship comes in is using that sword of discriminating intelligence, the sword of Archangel Michael, to cut yourself free of the illusions that hold you back, to cut yourself free of the human imperfection. So that's where the warriorship is really in examining the inner self, examining the ego, and saying, what is it I need to eliminate? So we should be really kind to others, but strict with ourselves.
Yeah.
The tendency is to look at what's wrong with the world and look what's wrong with everybody else and think I need to correct all that. But really, if we can correct what's within ourselves, we'll see that everything is perfect. So maybe I'm talking too much. Maybe you have some questions or you'd like me to talk about something else?
No, Peter, that's perfect. I think we all hear you and we resonate with every word you've spoken. Yeah, I wasn't actually asking to know the future because I, like you, feel that if we were told things in advance, this same dynamic would occur that you explained, that people would either wouldn't believe it or they'd fight against it, or it would set up this dynamic in their minds where they question it, and then it actually limits their participation with the alchemy of moving in to the future through the now by just being present moment by moment.
Exactly.
So this inner earth, I think the master Omram Mikhail Ivanhoff talked about Agartha, and we've been aware of that, and I agree with you that I think it's at a higher frequency, and some of us have actually had the experience of also kind of going there in our finer body and seeing that beautiful civilization that's at a much more refined level of awareness. And so thank you for sharing all of your amazing experiences. There are a few things in the books that I know a few people in our community may be a little, have questions about because of the fact that many of us were in the Summit Lighthouse before with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and I never really questioned what was in the book. I believe everything you said, and I see it from the experience that you're having, and I love what has come through you as total truth, beauty, harmony, and love. So, however, some people may not have had a great experience, let's say, with Satya Sai Baba, and I was recently in Minnesota, and some cherished heart friends there told me that Wayne Dyer had, been a devotee and then had learned something later on. And there's a BBC thing on the internet about it where it's claimed that he may have abused young, men and even women. So, in my opinion, your experience was your experience, and I think it totally has value and it has veracity. Do you think it's possible for an avatar or someone who's like a God man to actually, at some point, make mistakes and fall? I mean, I think that it's possible for all of us to fall, even if we're high initiates. People can make mistakes or be deluded or come into situations where they don't make the right decision. I don't know if you'd like to comment on this. I'd like to actually keep it positive, but I know some of the people in our community, when they read that in your books, they were questioning it.
Well, this is a very profound issue, and I'm aware of these stories, at first it caused me great anguish when I heard these, and caused me to doubt. And then I realized this is something I've had to look at over the past number of years, that you have a spiritual teacher that you think is wonderful and you see only the positive, then you start to learn negative things. This would pertain also to Elizabeth Prophet.
Exactly.
I've heard many stories about her. So what if we threw out all of her work because of those apparently negative things? Then that would be a shame.
Or you or me, for that matter. And I don't claim that I'm perfect, and I know I make a lot of mistakes, and I've made mistakes recently, and I've had to admit them and before, our community and say, I made this blunder and I apologize.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You can do that. Because as long as we're in the human, those types of things are inevitable. And, even Godfrey Ray King, as I was writing the book about Pearl, a number of IM students, I think they were sent to me really, came to me with revelations. And, I don't want to repeat those stories. In the beginning of Unveiled Mysteries, Godfrey says he was in Mount Shasta on government business. He was actually trying to get away from the government, is why he was here. Because there was forgot what it is, an indictment. He was being indicted in Chicago for fraud regarding raising money for gold mines. And rather than stay and face that, he came to Mount Shasta to get away. And I've seen photocopies of that indictment. So, so for a while, I severely doubted Godfrey. And then I thought, I started reading Unveiled Mysteries again, and I said, this is the highest book I have ever read. Without fail, I picked that book up, and I'm raised into the Ascended Master octave. So, sure, he made mistakes, and he had human imperfections. But Saint Germain found the best channel, the best vehicle he could to bring these teachings forth. And he made the statement, I am, brought that into the mainstream consciousness. Before that, it was all just in the Bible or it was in the Indian teachings,
Right.
But that was an invaluable service that he performed to release that into the aura of the planet and into the mass consciousness, and it took tremendous strength. And what's the point if I throw out all those teachings because he made some mistakes in his youth,
Yeah, so the same with Sai Baba.
Yeah.
Sai Baba influenced millions of people, probably for the positive. And even if he made some mistakes with whatever was, these claims are, it doesn't destroy all of the positivity. And when he appeared to you and the mystical experiences you've had still validate that God consciousness that he manifests in the body in his incarnate person. So, because Elizabeth Clare Prophet shared a story that she had with him where he actually came to her telepathically and told her to come to India.
Oh.
And she said it was very mesmerizing and she was ready to go. And then something inside of her said no. And so she didn't. And then she basically at that point disclaimed him. And that's the point of reference that I'm bringing up. But reading your book, I feel that we can't just judge everything as black and white and judge it and say someone's evil because of a mistake.
Yeah.
I think that there's good and there's a lot of value in what different spiritual teachers bring forth, and we have to be open to the fact that they have an audience, a dispensation, and in some cases a very huge audience that they're impacting. And when you're dealing with light and darkness at that level of like an avatar, the weight upon your shoulders sometimes is so great. It's like Jesus fell 3 times on the way to Golgotha. He couldn't bear the cross completely and have help from Simon the Cyrenian. So it's like any of us can fall under the weight of what we're bearing on behalf of the planet. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. But if you have anything more to share about Sai Baba, I would love for you to share it.
Well, a friend of mine back in New York was contemplating Sai Baba and, the apparent, all these stories about molestation and so on, and was losing faith in him. And Sai Baba appeared to her in a dream and said, "Are you judging me?"
Right.
And she realized she was judging. And then that kind of removed her attention from that. But on a larger scale, this brings up the whole principle of Tantra, which is what I've been working on over these last few years. Tantra means the unbroken continuity of consciousness. And if you look at these tankas, these Tibetan Buddhist tankas, that will show a deity in the center and then all different manifestations around the outside of it. For example, Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism to Tibet, he had wrathful emanations, peaceful emanations. He could appear in many different forms for many different purposes. And in these tantras, there are all kinds. There are wrathful beings and peaceful beings, angelic beings and demonic beings. The point being that each of us is the deity at the center of our own mandala. And you invoke different beings to play different roles at different times. So if you take responsibility for being the God presence in the center of your world, and that everything in your world is your own creation, then that's a tremendous leap forward. And in India, they have the expression, Tattvamasi, thou art that. Whatever you see is a manifestation of yourself. So everyone there is a manifestation of my consciousness, and it's up to me to see how I react to that manifestation. Now, a glaring example of that right now is Donald Trump. I'm not in favor of most of what he does, but I look and see, is there anger? Is there judgment, condemnation? If there is, that's something I need to work on. I need to look at the inner Trump. Is there anything that I am doing that corresponds to some aspect of his being? Am I 100% truthful? Am I ever angry? Do I ever say stupid things? So on and so on. So all these people are there for us to work on ourselves. And he could not be president without the masters having allowed that to happen. So I think it's an opportunity for all of us to look within and see, what does that bring up in me? And if there is a demon there, if I see him as a demon, well, then that's an opportunity for me to transform that demon into a deity. And that's really what Padmasambhava did with some of these demons. He turned them around and made them protectors of the Dharma, of the teachings. He transformed them. So all of us need to transform those beings from demons into angels and into masters. And that can only happen within ourselves. So, rather than decreeing, from now on, see to it that Donald Trump only tells the truth at all times, I can say, from now on, I am going to tell the truth at all times. And so you have a being like Sai Baba, who on one hand appears to be God, then on the other hand appears to be a child molester. Well, what aspect do I want to relate to? All I can say, in my evolution, Sai Baba has been nothing but an outpouring of goodness, and I cannot imagine where my evolution would be without him. So that doesn't mean shutting my eyes to stories that people tell, but what is it that I want to focus on?
Exactly.
So again, do I want people judging everything I do, saying I've fallen off the path,
like when you were working with Pearl and you explained in your book, there was a misunderstanding, and then it was all really an opportunity for the masters to move you into your path.
Right.
So you could grow, you could expand and do your mission. And then finally you reconciled much later, which was wonderful when she actually realized it was all good, right? And it was just kind of the way things move. It's like in my situation, I got kicked out of the summit because I presented what I was doing as an opportunity for them to have a new messenger, and they rejected it, and then the master started a new movement. And it's similar with the Bridge to Freedom, the Summit Lighthouse, etc. And your work, you took it beyond what Pearl was doing, and that's why we honor you, Peter, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing. In terms of your books, do you have, now you have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books, right? What do you have any recommendations for people in terms of what they should read first, and maybe just a few highlights about each of them that you'd like to share?
Well, there's 3 books now that are autobiographical. The first one, they were written in reverse order, actually. Yeah. The second book was written first. So the 2 books are called Adventures of a Western Mystic, books 1 and 2. So the first part is Search for the Guru, and that's about my early childhood in New York and my spiritual awakening, and the first 2 trips to India leading up to eventually meeting Saint Germain. But I think the book ends, I'm crossing the Golden Gate Bridge to have this rendezvous with Saint Germain, but it doesn't really talk about him at that point. So that book is mostly focused on Eastern teachings and my travels in India and so on, and meetings with some remarkable saints that I met in India, Anandamayi Ma and various other saints. Volume 2 is the one, Apprentice to the Masters, that starts out with meeting Saint Germain in Muir Woods and really deals with my apprenticeship to Saint Germain and the various ordeals that I went through. And then recently, just this last year, I came out with my trip to Tibet, which is, what the heck is the name of that?
My Search in Tibet for the Secret.
Tibet for the Secret, yeah, for the Secret Wish-Fulfilling Jewel.
Can I tell you an interesting story? I was able to interview Robert Thurman, and I received his permission to excerpt from one of his books, The Jewel Tree of Tibet, which I don't know if you can see me, but, but we published a booklet called The Jewel Tree of Tibet, Mentor Devotion, and then we recorded it, and it's so awesome that you know, here you have the Secret Wish-Fulfilling Jewel. And then we also have from Shanti Deva, from the book on the Bodhisattva Path, we excerpted a chapter, I think it's chapter 10. And since 2005, we've been doing this devotion, which we call the Bodhisattva Vision, which is phenomenal. And when I was in Tucson, after the Dalai Lama came there and consecrated a sacred place up in the mountains outside of Tucson, I found there, next to the stupa in this little sanctuary, they had a booklet with the same prayer that we had put in our prayer book. We got permission from the publishers, Shambhala Press, to put this. So we've been doing this, some of us daily since 2005. And it's just interesting that you had this wonderful experience, and Padmasambhava is so important to you. And, of course, the picture on your Adventures of a Western Mystic, Book 2, that was awesome. My wife said, I don't know if I like that picture, and I said, I love it. He's got the sword. He's got the sacred garment on. Maybe you could talk about that garment and Padmasambhava a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let me mention about the cover of that book. Some people get confused because I had some negative reactions to that cover, especially among Europeans. And I don't know what's happened. The sun is coming up here, so I'll try to turn that light on. Anyway, and people on the East Coast seem to have a negative reaction. So I changed the cover about 2 years ago. They just said, put a picture of your face on the cover. That's like an ego trip sitting there with a sword. And I said, well, didn't you read the explanation inside? And they said, well, it still looks like you're on an ego trip, you know. So then I discovered there really still a lot of people love the old cover, so I went back. So if you order a book and it doesn't have the same cover, it's out in 2 different editions. The inside is the same, it's just the cover that's different. So don't be turned off by that. But the interesting story is there was a woman, the woman who offered me the cabin in New York. This is interesting how the masters work. I had been feeling for about a year that I was going to leave Mount Shasta, but I didn't know where. And then about 20 people over the course of the summer showed up and said they were all from New York. And they all invited me to New York. And I said, that's strange. New York is the last place I think of going on a spiritual retreat. And then this woman showed up. And she said she'd been living on her hilltop, and suddenly she just had this irresistible urge to drive to Mount Shasta. So she and a girlfriend drove out here. They were in town about a month. And one day she went into Soul Connections, which is the metaphysical bookstore in town, and she saw my book, and she looked at that cover and said, boy, this guy's on a real ego trip. And she didn't buy it. And she left and started walking down the street. And she said she felt Saint Germain in front of her put his hand on her chest and say, go back and get that book. And
Great.
She tried to resist it, and she couldn't. So she went back and got the book, went back to the motel where she was staying. And as soon as she started reading it, she said, oh, this is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. And then she called me and said, can I come to your house? Well, we were having a group meditation that night, so she showed up, and then she just said she felt compelled to offer me this vacant cabin that she had on this hilltop. So it's obvious that she was sent by Saint Germain, although she didn't hear him. She just followed the feeling in her heart. But, you know, she again mentioned she didn't like that cover. So I was shown by Saint Germain. First of all, I never wanted my picture not only on my books, but in the books.
Yeah.
And so I was meditating one day when we were working on the graphic design. Saint Germain, please show me what cover. And I saw that image. And I said, oh, no, I can't do that. But he said, well, that's the cover. And see, I should have trusted that. And I gave in to human opinion to change the cover. You know, well, when you ask the master for guidance, then don't go asking other people, too, you know?
Thank you. It's beautiful.
So,
well, we both love Padmasambhava.
Robe.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you asked about the robe in there.
Yeah.
I got that in Lhasa. What happened is the airline lost my luggage. So I got to Tibet. You know, it's freezing at night. And, you know, even though it was in the end of August, it was still in the mountains, very cold. So I didn't have my Eddie Bauer Gore-Tex jacket with me or my gloves or anything. So I went to the square, to the market in Lhasa, and the translator was with me, and I got that beautiful robe. It's lined with a long-haired sheep's wool, I think. And as long as it was cold, it was great. But when we got in the car and it started to warm up, it would smell like a sheep, which my fellow travelers didn't appreciate too much. But I don't wear it around here. It's in storage. So anyway.
Well, there's so many parallels between what's happened to you and what's happened to me and some of us here. We're nearing the end. You know, Bruce at Soul Connections talked to me the other day, and by the way, he and Boyd used to work together. Boyd's the guy, you know, operating the camera.
Yeah,
they worked in a press room together for years and have known each other for probably 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, Bruce is very concerned about the marijuana situation in Shasta, and people come in a store and they reek, and a lot of them, unfortunately, rip stuff off too because they don't have money, and they. So could you just give us your take on that and what we can do besides just pray and meditate?
Well, it's very difficult because people use marijuana as a coping mechanism, the way some people use alcohol or something else, that they're under so much pressure or stress that they want something that relieves that. And it's kind of unfortunate because it really blocks the spiritual growth. That instead of looking, see, what is the cause of that stress? What is the source of that? And how can I work on that? That they turn to those substances. I feel that marijuana activates, first of all, let me say, all plants that grow on the earth have a divine purpose, even poison ivy, which is one of the great remedies of homeopathy for skin conditions and other things. So marijuana has legitimate medicinal uses. And most of those are non-psychoactive. It's not psychoactive if you take it in its raw form, or the CBD oil or something like that for inflammation. People have cured cancer with it, so on. But it's really seems to, when you have masses of people smoking it, you're not getting the medicinal quality by smoking it. And it activates the medulla, which is sort of the more primitive aspects of survival. So that's more like bringing out the lower aspects. And so I feel it's a detriment to people on the spiritual path to be smoking that, but there are legitimate medicinal uses. So yeah, I've noticed that, like in town now, there's something like 3 dispensaries. And it seems kind of sad to me, actually. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. The CBD oil, I tell people, is fantastic, and that's what really people should be using and focusing for healing in its raw organic state, and avoid the smoking, which brings all those particulates into your lungs anyway.
Sure. And it's interesting. I've seen people around town that I've known for 40 years, and it seems like their spiritual evolution stopped at a certain point. I mean, they're still nice people. And then I'm shocked to find out that they're heavy marijuana users, Yeah. And then I think, oh, that's it. Instead of using the stress as a springboard for spiritual growth, they're trying to get rid of the stress by smoking the marijuana,
Right.
So I make the call for those people. May they be blessed. But maybe it's better that they do that than that they have a nervous breakdown, or I don't know. It's a sad state of affairs, I think. And I have a friend who's a doctor at a hospital, and he said in Colorado, and people come from out of state for the weekend to get stoned, and a lot of them end up in the emergency room. I can't say a lot of them, but he's the emergency room filled on weekends with those people, because they'll go out and drive or get in fights or something like that. And anyway.
We'll all pray and set the intention that Mount Shasta will be moving forward and upward, and maybe hopefully avoiding additional dispensaries. Bruce told me there were 4, and then a 5th one has just been approved.
Oh,
so he's not too happy about it.
No, that's sad.
And we purify ourselves, as you said, first. We work on ourselves. Any final message for us? We just have about 3 minutes.
Just doing that spiritual work. When people find themselves stressed out about something, instead of reaching for a substance to deal with that, to go within and to meditate and do affirmations. And I will use sometimes the Sanskrit mantra just to focus and establish a certain force field. And once I get that going, then I'm in a cocoon of light. And there's no stress in that. And then I can do the affirmations. And then as that energy starts to flow through me, there is no stress at all, that I become a divine being sending blessings to the world. So as we seek to bless others, we are blessed, Well,
thank you, Peter, for telling Morya and Kuthumi are deciding with Maha Chohan that you would stay with us for a little longer.
Yeah, thank you.
And we
It's a
look forward
pleasure
to
be with
seeing you in late July next year when we come back to Mount Shasta. We're changing the dates. We usually come in August. We're going to be there in late July, and we look forward to whatever you would like to share with our community for a couple hours at least during our event, and we'll see how we can collaborate in the future.
Okay. Well, keep up the good work, and my blessings go out to everyone watching, and to all your students. I'm sure the masters are aware of every single one of you.
And the sun's lighting right over your third eye.
Yeah, I noticed.
So have a great day. God bless you. We love you and send you lots of higher frequencies of appreciation and gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Any blessings.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, everyone.